So I was raised Christian Catholic, and I practiced it a little bit, but after like third grade, I didn't really practice it much. And then freshman year, there's a certain deacon I saw at my school, and he just like made the faith come alive to me. I saw the Shroud of Turin on a what's it called? I'm trying to remember the term on a video. I know it was like, well, this is real stuff. It's crazy. And so I just started practicing again, reading the Bible, all that stuff, and here I am. High school. You there? I think you're freezing. Oh, that's strange. Wonder where he went. That's very strange. Wonder where he went. I don't know what to do in the meantime. Well, if you got any questions, put them in the live chat and I might answer them when he comes back. Oh, yeah. What happened? You like froze up, then you just like and you left. Oh, okay. So what were you saying? might be luck of the draw because actually my most popular video was on Islam. I called it the Disciples Dilemma. It got like 870 views. But yeah, one of my shorts I made on Islam, like the classic dilemma, but the short version it did really bad. So yeah, I think it might be some glitch with the shorts.
Like your favorite type of Islamic dilemma. So what's your answer on that one? What's your own personal favorite Islamic dilemma?
What I think it's not necessarily one, but there's a video I watched. I forgot who the guy was called. It was one of like the main guys that attacks Islam, and it
Mm-hmm.
kind of a combination between the clarity dilemma and the Islamic dilemma. It basically starts off saying, well, the
Mm-hmm.
Quran claims it's clear. Is this true or not? If you claim no, obviously the Quran's false. If you claim yes, well then the clarity would show that it affirms the gospel and the Torah, which it very clearly does. Is like let the Christians judge by the gospel and type of stuff. So whatever explanation Muslims give about the Torah was corrupted, that type of stuff, it has to be clear, and it's not really clear.
Exactly. Yeah. There's something from I think it was Testified. That might have been the same guy you were talking about, but he essentially makes the case that he talked more about like controversial subjects, like the fact that you can strike a woman to have her submit, or the age of marriage and what's that, Surah 65 for, and saying that if the Quran says that it's clear, but if everyone's disputed on this, because all the medieval Islamic theologians thought, yeah, that's fine, but all the modern people who are more have more issues with it are trying to rewrite it, then the Quran is no longer clear, because either A, everyone in the past was completely wrong on it because it wasn't clear, or B, everyone today is completely wrong on it because it wasn't clear. But either way, the Quran isn't clear as it claims.
I think the video I uploaded yesterday, the scientific one, I think it's logically my weakest because I think there's a way you can kind of get out of it, but I think it's still pretty good. I think I made it pretty well. And I think the math video you made recently, I think that's really good. I never even heard of that. Actually, I might have heard of it, but it's very interesting because I think algebra was created to explain the inheritance laws in Islam, but even there it kind of gets messed up.
That's interesting. I wasn't aware of that in terms of the origin of algebra. I definitely do like the. Oh, we have a question. I'll just finish my thought and then jump to the question. I'm not sure. I think I can show it on screen. Give me half a second. But I definitely the in terms of like preferred subject, I was always a math guy over a science guy, and I don't know if you were a science guy, but I think that they're both so effective insofar as math is just objective; the numbers don't add up. With science, what you were saying in the video is that if they try to go and take a very artistic, symbolic, metaphorical view of all these passages, then they can no longer claim that they're scientific miracles, because every time there's not a scientific miracle, they say, "Oh no, that's just metaphor or poetry." At which point, they don't have a claim for the actual claimed scientific miracle.
So
I'm
what
gonna
did? Oh,
see
sorry.
if this comment can pop. Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh no, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You can go ahead.
Oh, how would you do that?
It nicely. StreamYard seems to be being convenient with me. It gave me the option to just pop that up on screen. So that's our first question comment, which says, "Sorry, it's actually now just minimized itself on me. Do you know why who Muslims say corrupted the scriptures? They say Christian Jews rewrote their text to exclude Muhammad. Do you want to take that, or do you want me to take that, or we can both take
Hmm.
it? Which order do you want to go first or second?
It's up to you. Is that on your channel?
I'll give it a shot at it. Say again.
Is that on your stream?
Oh, yes, it is on my stream. Actually, if there's any questions that come up on your stream, I'm not sure if you can put them on, but feel free to read them off or something like that. Or I guess if you can comment their question, I'm not sure that works. If you have any questions on your stream, this is the first one we've gotten on this side of things, and we can definitely go over those as well, because I can't see your stream currently. I can only see my end. But to answer K. Pelly, part of this is in terms of the actual like Islamic sources. The answer is that no one says, or no Muslims don't have anyone that says that the Christians and Jews corrupted the scripture, because, as Heretic was saying, the Quran actually affirms the inspiration and the preservation and the authority of the gospel. There are some verses in the Quran that Muslims will try to turn to say that they've been corrupted. There's something that say that like they corrupted with their words, which doesn't mean that the text was changed. It means that they were speaking and they were lying about it. They moved the words from their places, which is talking about misquoting. But in terms of the actual text, you have Islamic affirmation that the words of Allah cannot be changed. I think that 6115, Surah 6115, and 285 says that you can't pick and choose different parts of it. So in terms of their actual founding sources, they have to affirm the Torah and the Gospel, and that's the foundation of the Islamic dilemma. In terms of who they say changed it after, I think the big one they go off of, and you may know this better than I, Heretic, is they just really hate Paul. just because Paul is their easy excuse. They think that Paul changed everything, Paul ruined everything. The disciples were all Muslims, but Paul was a guy who just utterly ruined the Muslim Jesus way of life, so to speak. And so a lot of that is really just post hoc because originally Muhammad thought, "Oh, I am in the Jewish and the Christian scriptures. You can just look at them." Then he found out that he wasn't, and he's like, "No, I am in the scriptures. They're just lying about me." And then it became clear when they actually had their own copies of the Torah and the Gospel in Arabic that Muhammad is not in those scriptures. So you have to invent the corruption, which is contradiction to the Quran. But the fact of the contradiction is what the Islamic dilemma runs off of.
And I think it's so central to the Quran because it pops up so many areas. It's like, oh, it keeps saying chapter for chapter that God inspired the Torah, inspired the gospel. It's like not an issue they can easily run away from. And yeah, it's true. They do try and go after Paul. They try and call Christianity Paulism. It's so strange with the names. But I think I can't verify this, but I heard that there was some Islamic source that actually speaks to Paul, saying he actually was a good guy or something like that. But I'm not sure. It's doesn't catch up historically. It doesn't make sense with early Muslim interpretation sometimes.
Yeah. I'm actually not sure. To the next question, do they have a motive why Paul would change the scriptures? I guess they just thought he was a bad guy. I really be interested in anything they say that say he's a good guy. This is an area where I don't know. I don't know what Muslims say. I don't know what Muslim sources say about Paul. Rather, I know that modern Muslims hate him because they say, "Oh, he didn't even know Jesus," which isn't correct. There's the road to Damascus and all. But beyond practicality of like we have to say that Paul is evil in order to defend our religion, I don't think they have a specific like motive for the crimes of Paul of rewriting the Gospels and the Torah. Actually, I'm not even sure they say Paul rewrote the Torah or they say that just later Jews did, but it is all like just to see that we're doing post hoc. Like they're making it up on the fly because they can't turn to their actual scriptures because their scriptures are from our scriptures. So they need to come up with reasons not to actually speak about them. Sorry, I just accidentally minimized that out. I was going to say, on the topic of Islam, so you've done videos, essentially, you've done stuff about atheism, you've done stuff about Islam, you've done stuff about Protestantism. And I don't think we have a Paschal Wager video, let me just finish editing. But Islam is the one area of crossover. And is that something for you personally that you've got into recently? Like recently you've come to the idea, like before you didn't really think much about Islam, but now you're like, something happened to make you start bringing it up? Or you always thought, no, Islam's a false religion, I should speak about it more? Like, what's your mental history with Islam? Have you always felt about it as you have presently, or is that a new development?
I haven't really ever considered Islam. I always thought it was kind of a little strange. But I think it was about a year ago when I started learning more about apologetics in Islam, and I think it's really not a well supported religion. There's tons of contradictions. It's just doesn't work out well. And even the even early Muslim sources, they have some really questionable things. Like the verses we talk about with like child marriage, the early Muslim sources affirm that's about child marriage. It kind of backs up our position on against their own religion.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and personally, beyond this is probably a less academic reason to go against Islam, but I, like you, just didn't really think about Islam much, and eventually just found people on the internet making commentary about Islam, and the more I learned about Islam, the more, like you say, ridiculous it seems. It doesn't stand up on its own 2 feet. I think that some of the critiques of atheism at least attempt to have more grounding than that. Because I think that atheism at a foundational level is honestly kind of ridiculous. I think the argument from origin from the first cause is such a powerful argument that the atheist explanation of the universe, nothing in no place at no time for no reason created everything, then everything exploded, and that's why existence existed, is pretty silly. Like you can go first mover arguments all the way back to Aristotle. I think the basic existence of God is so clear, but some things atheists bring up, like the problem of evil, like those are pointed critiques. Like there's something that you need to address there. But with Islam, just because they're so foundationally off, because they have a prophet who thought he was in the Bible and the Torah and he wasn't, and they ended up having to spread their religion primarily through force of arms because it wasn't have actual like convincing, staying theological power. It's just that it's so interesting that it continues by inertia instead of theological power because it continues in places where there are Islamic conquests, but that's in large part because once they were conquered, they imposed dhimmi status on everyone there, and eventually Islam becomes easier, less so true, if that made sense. I actually have as this is a question. Have you heard of the catchphrase? I can't remember who was said it, but the quote unquote avalanche of apostasy.
Yeah, I've heard about that. I'm not sure if it's true or not, but there is definitely, I think, some people that are leaving Islam because with the internet, it's a lot easier to see these verses that go they're really strange. Like one verse says that the stars are missiles that God uses to stone demons. It's really strange.
That's always the funniest thing because that honestly sounds super cool. Like science, no, but it sounds really cool. That stars are just missiles to shoot at demons. Like that's the most interesting thing about Islam, even if it's completely silly. Do you think, generally speaking, like the status of Islam in our society, do you think it's more of a? I guess everyone always wants to say that their religion is growing and back and forth, but do you think that Islam is? Do you think that Islam is a threat? Or actually, I should ask the question: are you in America?
Yeah, I'm in America.
Yeah, I think for me as well. But do you think that Islam is an actual something that is a threat to change America in the sense of like, is Islam actually going to spread? Is Islam going to spread through immigration, through dawah, through whatever? Or do you think that this is mostly just attempting to lead people individually to the truth? That it's not so much stop Islam before they get us, but more so engage with them on theological grounds. Or I guess the halfway point is they're not going to get America, but they might get Europe.
Well, in one sense, it's not much of a threat. In another sense, it is because it's not. I wouldn't say it's really spreading too much with Dawah. I think it's more so spreading like by immigration. In that Muslims have a pretty high birth rate, which is I think one of the reasons that Christianity spread so quickly early on is because, in contrast to like pagans who would often just like kill their babies, Christians had more children, and that it kind of spread a lot. That's how it spread a lot faster.
Yeah. I think there's definitely something to that. It does seem like I European politics or theology is not European theology. You know, the Muslim situation in Europe is not my period of expertise. But it does seem like you have to hit a certain like critical mass before you can start growing in that way. Like in London, because one, you have a large immigrant population, and two, like you say, the birth rate is high. You actually get like a steady growing situation. But in America, the level of immigration to kick off the birth rate mattering would have to be so high that because like if the population goes from 2% to 4%, it's not a big deal. But if you're in London, it goes from 20% to 30%. That's a much bigger deal. So I do think it is probably mostly immigration and birth rate. And then the question is, at what point does that reach a level at which it builds on itself, or will it continue building on itself? Actually, I guess that's another question. Like, do you think that Islam is going to will Islam go the way of nominal Christianity insofar as you see like people who are cradle Catholics, like they're raised in Catholic, but they don't actually do with it, or a lot of mainline Protestantism, where like, oh, we're religious, but in both situations, they're not really committed to the faith. Is Islam going to be able to grow enough by its birth rate that it can avoid becoming nominal Islam, cradle Islam, mainline Islam? Do you think that Islam is actually going to be able to stand up to that, or do you think that modernization is going to, like you said with the internet, just kind of bring it down in the same way that a lot of Christians in the U.S. have apostatized, not into like heresy, but into just, I don't care about religion that much.
I'm not sure. On the one hand, like a lot of online Muslims are very militant and stuff like that, but oftentimes sometimes in person they're not so much. So I'm not fully sure actually.
Yeah. I have a couple of just other random questions. I think, but I don't want to dominate this and act like I don't get all the questions. Is there anything that you wanted to ask, or any topics that you thought would be interesting to talk about? Chill Q&A, whatever you like.
I really like your abortion videos. I think they're actually really cool. How do you like do research for videos like that?
I honestly, so before so like in the last couple of years, I started to like dig back in and like I need to walk in my faith. Before that, I was in that category where kind of badly you almost make politics into a religion. So I was just so active. I mean, by active, I mean mostly fighting online and not doing as much probably in person and actual action that I should on issues like abortion, on issues like maintaining the definition of marriage, on all these different matters, even things that aren't directly like theological, like for example, like very anti-gun control. But abortion is something that I, on many forums online, have been in many long text arguments over the years, and eventually, bit by bit, like just start to refine arguments. That, and then also, I feel like in a certain sense, everyone is a bit of a accumulation of all of the things that they've heard from other people. Like we all have our own ideas, but like, oh, I heard this conservative or this Christian say this good thing, and I'm going to think about that and either put it into the repertoire as a good point, or try to build off it into something else. Like the one video which I really appreciate you like them, that I really liked and wished got more attention, but maybe it'll get somewhere was the human children are human one, just because I think as a phrase, that is something that is so potent and powerful. Like, unfortunately, a lot of politics is just phrasing. Like, not to take an opinion on either side. We can talk about politics if you want, but like Black Lives Matter is a very powerful phrase, and it just works very well. And like love is love, which I think is a very deceptive use of terminology, was so powerful. And I was thinking in the same vein as like love is love. What's something that you can say that on its face clearly indicates the morality of the issue? That if you'd want to try to argue against it, you have to like be explaining. The whole idea that like you're explaining, you're losing. Like if someone says love is love, and then you have to explain, no, that's not what that means. Then you're explaining, you're losing. But if we have something like that we say human children are human, then I say, then they're on the defensive, they're on the back foot, and they're having to actually like stop and think about and try to justify the fact that you're killing a human child. So that one in particular, I think that brain flash, I don't know, a little gift of inspiration or something like that. It came into my mind, and I hope it can be. It's something that builds up from learning from other sources, but then you have a little bit. You can just try to add your own little piece onto it. Like you're slowly building a mountain, and you have one stone, and someone else has one stone, and someone else has another stone, and hopefully that can then grow into something better. I think I'm ranting on a little bit, but it very much is. That was something I was into very aggressively and over the years, and then that developed into something that I hope are like good, effective arguments in that line, like the human children are human, like the argument around could you not feed a newborn? Is that a her body, her choice argument? That sort of thing.
I just got a question in the chat. Someone asked, Joshua,
Okay.
why do you worship Mary? We don't worship Mary.
Oh gosh.
Oh my. The difference between worship and veneration is sacrifice. That's why, like, when the Collyridians came out, who basically were like offering cakes to Mary, we were like, no, that's not okay. That's why we don't. That's one of the main things we don't do with Mary or any of the saints. We do not offer sacrifice to the saints.
Yeah, it is. This is an interesting matter because I think there is the straw man argument, but then I will say something that I do have a real concern with. So, like, the straw man argument is like funny. The like the Muslims say that Mary is the third member of the Trinity. You have the Father and the Son and Mary. That's a funny Quran error, and that's something where it just becomes a meme. But I will say, and we don't have to get too far into this if we want to stay more chill, but it's something that I do raise as a concern that in learning more about Catholicism, that's something that's been something that I've been a greater concern to me. Like, so I grew up in a very Catholic neighborhood. I always made the joke that all my friends were Catholic, but none of them were, in the sense that they were all just kind of like nominal Catholics. And I just like Catholics are the ones with hope. I didn't really have a strong opinion. But in learning more, the level of veneration given to Mary is something that just at some point you say instinctive, and at some point you can say theological, comes off as so concerning insofar as the sense of sometimes you see the arguments like, oh, there's no scripture that specifically says I can't do this, or that. But if the general framework of scripture is there's no provision for praying to anyone other than God, not seeking to communicate with the dead, the it's either Matthew 11 or Luke 11 where a woman comes up to him and says, blessed are the breasts that you nursed at and the womb that bore you. And Jesus says, on the contrary, blessed are those who hear the word of God and obey it. That sort of mindset, which doesn't mean that you're disrespecting Mary, because Mary is someone who did hear the word of God, did receive from God, and obey it. But the unique status given to the physical motherhood itself, even the notion of calling Mary our mother, which I had not even heard of until a Catholic friend of mine in real life mentioned it a little while ago, it comes to a level of concern. And unfortunately, if one puts it in a very straw-man-y sense, then I think the real concern can kind of get covered over because it's seen as only a straw man. But that is something that I feel kind of obligated to say. It's concerning to see the level of devotion given. And I understand that there are arguments made for it, but it's not something that I've seen a scriptural foundation for. And I didn't say, I don't want to turn this into a debate if you don't want it to, but if you want to talk about that, we can shift off to another topic. I don't want to turn this into a fight if you don't want to.
There's one thing I would say that you are right. There are sometimes some concerning things like someone made a Marian Psalter where they basically replaced the word like for Lord and God for. They're like, no, that's when you start replacing God with Mary. That's where you get off like cut off. Like that's not okay.
Yeah, and I will say that something where I can say, good job by the papacy. The what's the term for it? Whatever, the co-redemptrix is no longer to be a term to apply to Mary that Leo put out a few months ago. I think that's a real positive step in a good direction. It is interesting that Marian devotion in some senses has accelerated a little bit recently, like the Immaculate Conception and the Assumption of Mary are both like from the 1800s and the 1900s. So I do think hopefully that for something like stepping back on co-redemptive that it's moving in a positive direction. Obviously, something I still have concerns over, but if that's the if it move steps in the right direction, hopefully further steps in the right direction will come. Yeah, I think the comment that he had there. Someone had a lot of things to say about that. I guess everyone's entitled to their opinion, so to speak. I don't know. Having no, the question of free speech in the Bible would be a funny one, but I don't actually have an opinion on that, so I've got nothing more to say there. I'll cut myself off before I just ramble on.
Kind of related. Have you read some of the church fathers? Like I have a whole document I made. I might make a video on it where I just like document all our research. I call it Super Weapon. It's kind of funny. It's like all just all in one.
Yeah, so I probably less so than most people. So I guess it's not a church father; it's a church document. The Didache is a document that I really like. So that seems to be depending on either that or Clement's first epistle is either the earliest extra biblical source that we have, to my understanding, and I quite like it insofar as it's a very clear layout of what the church looked like in the first century, and it's very short. So if anyone's getting into church history, I'd start with the Didache just because it's relatively short and easy. But in terms of actually like getting open the books and reading through the church fathers, I'll fully admit that I haven't done that to the level I should. I've read some of Clement. I've read a little bit of Augustine. I've read John Chrysostom. I was introduced to recently, and a lot of his homilies are really nice and they're quite enjoyable to read. But obviously, as a Protestant, I tend to put less focus on the church fathers as inherently interpretive authorities. I still think they are valuable to have wisdom. I think some people will say, "Oh, why would you read a church father when you can read the Bible?" But they can still give wisdom in the way that they interpreted things, especially because there's some interest in that they have different opinions on things. Like if you take, I guess Tertullian and Origen are both more like on the edges of church fathers, and that they both were a bit heterodox. But it's interesting to read them, and they lived in practically the same time. I think Tertullian's a little bit earlier, but the level of differences that they can have, even coming from the same sources, which is quite interesting. But in terms of like good detailed study of the church fathers, I haven't gotten into as much as I ought to. It's something I'm looking to roll into while I'm keeping the mindset of this is something that I think is profitable, but it's not the only thing. If I'm not reading my Bible as much as I should, then I shouldn't be putting it to the side to read the church fathers. But also if I'm doing something like goofing off, reading the church fathers is certainly better than doing that.
Yeah, obviously, like if you're not reading your Bible, then like reading the church fathers isn't gonna do much. So, yeah, I do agree. Like the Bible is obviously much more important than church fathers. They can say some weird stuff. I think Justin Martyr said that demons are the children of fallen angels and women. It's like what?
Oh, this is the sidebar topic of every Christian conversation, but that whole like the Nephilim, where it's like, oh, what are the Nephilim? They're the sons of God and the daughters of men. Are they half demons? Are they fallen angels sleeping with women? And I think a lot of it is just very like good internet clickbait where you have like a weird picture of like a demonic looking thing made in an AI avatar. But there's some wacky stuff, and some people like the wacky stuff, but I guess I just shrug it. It's like I don't know exactly what the Nephilim are. That's not my greatest concern in the scripture. I'm not going to say don't look at it, but I think some people can get into like cryptids in the Bible. Like I think they're just trying to go into it more for fun. You can have fun with scripture, but don't put truth aside to go for fun.
One thing I heard is that that verse about the daughters of men and the sons of God is about the two lines from Cain and is it Seth or something like that. And at least they were like Cain's line was like murderers, adulterers, polygamists, and Seth's line was like righteous. That's if they started intermarrying. That's where it all like went downhill for everyone. That's when I think that's what started the flood. But is it Seth or is that Noah's son? I forgot.
I think it is Seth. Yeah, Noah's sons are Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Yeah, okay. So I think you're right about that. And from my limited understanding of the Nephilim, that's also my position, that it is probably referring to two different groups of humans and not weird angel demonic hybrids. But that's more boring. So less people are gonna follow the boring thing. On church father, I know. So well, I didn't say I know. I'm pretty sure. I know your profile image is Augustine. Is he a particular favorite of yours, or like what have you read in the church father? You're talking about your super weapon.
So for Augustine, not to make a big deal, but it's actually pronounced Augustine, actually. But I read
that's my error.
Come on, I read his Confessions, then I read City of God. They're both really good books. Yeah, like City of God is
City of God's a long one. That's dedication. I'm impressed by that.
1,000 pages. A lot of it's just like going over what pagans believe, and then it like just refutes them all. They got some stuff about the Stoics, which is interesting. I think it's a pretty good read. I think he's my confirmation saint, which is why I have him as my profile picture. I think he's pretty cool dude. Went from like zero to hero, so to speak. Went from
Mhm.
living fornication and really grievous sins to being a man of God.
Yeah, the interesting transition from like Manichaeism, and then even the way that he changes over the course of his life. Augustine, no one can say that Augustine isn't fascinating, even if they disagree with him. And I disagree with Augustine on a number of things, unsurprisingly. But you can't say he's not fascinating. It's a funny thing. Just this is with confirmation things. This is a little bit of a silly story. But growing up, like I said, I grew up in a very Catholic neighborhood. My main thought on Catholicism was envy, which is a funny little thing because I was a silly little kid. But because and I think it's a universal fact. You can correct me on this. But when you have your first communion, that you get, I know that's separate from confirmation, but your first communion, you get donations from like everyone in the church, and you get like a nice little bit of money. And so all my friends were like getting like hundreds of dollars at their first communion. I'm a Baptist, so we don't get anything at our first communion besides the communion. So that was always funny, just as a kid. I'm like, hey, how come you guys get all that?
I actually don't remember that. It's been a while since my first communion.
Yeah, I can't tell you if it was universal or not. I know it was the case around here, which is the limits of what I have with that. This is a I'll shoot a spitball out there because I don't actually know entirely my thoughts. So I'm Protestant, you're Catholic. Do you have any thoughts on the what seems to be the rise of internet Eastern Orthodoxy? I don't know how much that's actually like in real life more people are converting to Orthodoxy, but certainly on the internet it's become a big thing.
It's interesting. I have a certain fascination with face English fascination with like Eastern iconography and that stuff like that. But yeah, I haven't really experienced it too much because I those discords I'm on, I don't really talk about that stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's really cool. I heard I'm not sure if it's gonna happen, but maybe that Catholicism might unite more with Eastern Orthodoxy in the future. Where it's like it's not like they're gonna absorb Eastern Orthodox, but it's like they like they keep their own traditions, that type of stuff, but just in communion with Rome. I think it's hopefully that could be pretty cool.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm while not an expert on that, I'm aware of like the Eastern Rite Catholics, and the theology is technically Catholic, but like the style and the liturgy and stuff is more Orthodox. That's sort of a bit of a blending.
There's this one denomination that I'm not sure many people have heard of. It's called Oriental Orthodox. They're Orthodox, but they split off after Chalcedon, which is in the 400s. They think that Christ had one nature, human and divine. So it's not their Christology is not technically heresy, but it's a little fringe and pretty similar to Orthodox in that regard. They're I've heard a lot of Eastern Orthodox online like saying like the rosary's bad because you shouldn't be thinking of stuff while praying. But the Oriental Orthodox guy I know, he's totally fine with the rosary, which is interesting. It's like they're in some areas they're farther apart, some areas they're closer than Eastern Orthodox.
Hmm. Yeah, that's one of the interesting things, just insofar as the complexity of Christology. Because, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, my general understanding is that the Oriental Orthodox are more Miaphysite, as in like there needs to be one nature, and then the Assyrian Church of the East is Nestorian, like a very aggressive separation of the natures. And we're both Protestant and Catholic are Chalcedonian, which is the one person with two natures, the human and divine nature. And just it's the sort of thing that it's nerd theology in a certain sense, like the exact nature of the homoousius versus the homoiousius. And I guess that's Arianism. That's a separate topic. But even just coming aware, like for most of my life, Eastern Orthodox, like Eastern Orthodox, they're the ones that aren't Catholic. They're just over there. But it's not just Eastern. Like I said, it's Eastern Orthodox, it's Oriental Orthodox, it's Syrian Church of the East. There's probably some others that I'm not even thinking of, but it's an interesting point of church history because all of them claim to be apostolic in a certain sense. They all have their little cutoff, like, oh, this council is where the church went wrong. No, this council is where the church went wrong. It's just there's a great deal of fascination there, I think.
So like, how do you prepare to make your videos? How do you do research and plan for them?
Yeah, so it's largely. I wish I could say that I had a great academic library, but it is. I I will usually, and it's more freeform. I will get a topic that I'm like that would make a good thing for video, and then we just have a document that we throw it in, and then I'll do what I call just like the sifting phase, which is like I wonder if other people have commented on this. Like, oh, what if I made a video on like Muhammad and slavery is a video that I keep meaning to get more scripting done on. So it'll be like, okay, what have some other people said about this, like commentators and stuff. And that's like the sifting phase. And then if it's like, okay, I think there's something that I can add to this conversation, then it just goes into the direct searching, which in the internet age is very nice. You can just go to Quran.com and look at sources. You can look at top views. You can look at stuff like that. Or if you're talking scripturally, then I don't have Logos, so apparently Logos is very good. But you can go and you can look at Bible Hub or Blue Letter Bible and look at commentary and say, on this issue, what is it saying? What is this group saying? What is that group saying? And then see if something can be gained from it. So kind of like a step of general thought, that sounds useful. Listen to other people to see, okay, I don't want to just be copying off something that someone else said. Can I actually add anything? And then getting into more like primary source examples. Something that actually, in terms of sourcing, that's been very nice, especially because I've been in the most successful video on our channel that went really big, which is neat, is a video on Jehovah's Witnesses, which is based off of, I talked to Jehovah's Witnesses at a booth. I made a video about it, and I think it has over 300 comments by like 4 people, because there are like 3 or 4 Jehovah's Witnesses that are constantly saying things again and again and again and again. And that gets very exhausting trying to deal with it. But speaking directly to the searching topic, archive.org has a really big collection of like scans of physical books that usually like you might not even be able to find in the library, or you have to pay a lot of money for. And it's really useful to look at. I found some stuff actually for our most recent Islam video on Islam and disarmament. I found some really useful sources on Dimitude, which was a book that was like an obscure book that you couldn't find anywhere else, but they had it on archive.org. Or in that case, looking at the early JW writings like Charles Taze Russell and all the false prophecies and stuff. So in terms of like a useful resource that I didn't know about until recently, archive.org is surprisingly helpful for finding actual book sources without having to go to the libraries. And I live in a major American city, so I'm lucky enough that there's usually a reasonable amount of books at a library that I can go to if I'm really digging into something. But that's been a really nice online resource in the digital age.
So what are your plans for
Something
future? Oh, sorry.
go ahead.
Sorry,
No, you go ahead.
you said you started first.
Yeah, this is more of a, I guess almost a style question, but AI usage. So I am like an old fogey. I'm like a 90-year-old man and less than 90-year-old body, where AI just spooks me out. I think I'm just like one generation older, just old enough that it. Ugh. But I know I saw that you mentioned like a couple of your description that like you had done some like thumbnails and description setup with AI, and I'm just maybe it's just too broad a question. I'm broadly curious about that. Is that something that, yeah, how did that work? Is that something you're just experimenting with, or something that? Oh, sorry, the sun is coming in. Give me half a moment. But yeah, sorry. What are your thoughts on that? Let me see if I can block this as you talk.
I think AI is a tool, but it shouldn't replace human argument. Like the way I use it for making hooks and thumbnails, but I try to make it original and oftentimes like just adding my own spin on it. Usually I think of a concept per video, and I find quotes, and then I just generally overview how I should do it with AI. But I don't ask AI to write my scripts. I think that's where I would draw the lines. If AI is writing it and you're not, then that's not okay.
Yeah, I've started to wonder, and you see it sometimes. I've seen it in some online content with Muslims in debates, or even just any street debates, like, oh, ChatGPT, how do you solve the Islamic dilemma, sort of thing. And it's concerning because you do wonder if we as a society are going to come to a point where argumentation kind of falls to the side because everyone's just punching it into AI. So AI, the thinking thing, is a little bit concerning. So honestly, as a practical matter, it probably would not be a bad idea to do things like you say with thumbnails, where it's like, boy, AI would be easier with that. I'm just a little bit too stubborn about it, and maybe that's just me, or I don't know. Maybe that means I'll avoid the robot apocalypse. Probably.
Robot apocalypse.
You were asking before I interrupt. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I
No,
interrupted you.
I just said robot apocalypse because that's funny. What was
Yeah.
I gonna say?
I think you were asking before I jumped in with the AI question about like future videos. Is that what your question?
Oh yeah, what are your like plans for future video series, like that type of stuff?
Yeah. So one thing, actually, I'd be really curious of your opinion on this one, but I'll put this aside for a second. But we're hopefully we talked about this on email, and this is my own fault for being slow with it. I'm really trying to put together a video on the Crusades, and I talked about the mindset of it. It's something very visual. I think would be very neat. And then 2 video ideas, and one of them is taking the table of the contents of the Bible and saying like, if you think that the Crusades were an aggressive colonial war, look at the table of the contents of the Bible. Look at where these books were written to. Like look at Thessalonians to Thessalonica. Look at Corinthians to Corinth, and almost every single book of the Bible that has a location, except for Romans, is a city that either was taken over by Islamic invasion before the Crusades, or after the Crusades ended, was taken over after the fact. Corinth was taken over, Galatia was taken over, Thessalonica was taken over, etc. And doing something like that was like it visually on screen, like crossing through all of them, and then I was going to have a similar thing with a map with those same cities. I think that would. I really like the idea. I'm just not an artistic person, and I need to try to use Canva like you had mentioned. But that's something that I really want to put out. I'm just doing a poor job of it. But the thing that I was well, so sorry. So I have that with Islam. I do have a couple of videos on Catholicism talking about transubstantiation, and I cannot remember what the second one was, but the transubstantiation one is complete. But something that I'd be interested, and we can talk about that one if you want to too. That I'd be interested in your opinion on, because I don't actually know where Catholicism falls. Do you know much about continuationism versus charismatic versus cessationist, like on the tongues and the gifts of the Spirit and such? I know that there's a group of I know there's a subset of charismatic Catholics. But I think that's more of a subset, right?
Not too familiar with. I've heard the name of charismatic Catholics. I'm not too sure what they do exactly, but I do think the
Yeah,
church's position is that miracles do continue, like because we see like demonic possessions and that type of stuff. It's crazy. There's some interesting miracles that have happened recently. Actually,
yeah,
that's part of the reason I had that document that I called Super Weapon. I document places in the Fathers where they actually what's it called, recollect certain miracles, like Polycarp after he dies. I think people have a vision of him, and even Polycarp before he dies prophesies that he's gonna get killed, and it happens. I think the thing wasn't written by Polycarp himself, but it's called the Martyrdom of Polycarp. I think it's pretty interesting stuff. Actually, I think I mentioned that in the video on your four great reasons video. I mentioned it in relation to relics. I think.
yes, yeah. That was an interesting point insofar as like the difference between relics and icons. And I will say, as a general rule, I'm more well versed on history of icon than history of relics. I'm more comfortable with the idea of relics as an icon. Like obviously you can go too far, and my concern with the Protestants is often going too far, like being very careful about what could be idolatry. But generally with relics, I think there's more of an understanding. With Polycarp, my understanding is that they went and they carried his body off with like in great honor. But as relics, insofar as those are, I think I said this in the video, like a person is made in the image of God, and therefore like treating their body with honor is treating something that's in the image of God with honor. Icons becomes a much more scary thing because of it's making a graven image that is not in the image of God. It can be an imitation of the image of God, but if I'm making a painting of Mary or Augustine or Christ or any of the saints or something like that, that is a object made by human hand. And that's actually it's funny. Icons are not in everyday life a very big thing. But I will say that's probably one of the largest reasons why I am outside of Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Just because icons seem to be so absent in the early, we don't have to have a debate on this, but just that they seem to be so entirely absent in the early church, so broadly against the very long, extensive Old Testament notions on not making graven images, that they come in so late and then become mandated. So, but relics is something I really think I should look more into because I'm less going to be immediately like, no, you can't do that. It's something I ought to look more into because I know less about it, but also it seems like it's more. I would have more latitude for that. I think. Yeah, I think. Sorry, it flipped out for a second. With continuation, something that's hopefully the next video we're going to put up. Actually, I'll go off to the side. I'm thought of hanging around. But it does seem like there's a big movement. I think this is mostly among Protestants that I disagree with. That is cessationist, which just says there's no tongues. Like God Himself can do a miracle, but like there's no prophecy and such like that. And I think that is largely correct in terms of the normative function of the church. Like I'm not expecting most people are not expecting to go into church and someone's going to speak in tongues, someone's going to prophecy. I might not ever see that in my life, but it does seem like the language that Paul uses, does like First Corinthians end of First Corinthians 14, I think, that do not forbid speaking in tongues. That states against like a firm position that says no, this can never happen. Like, should it be all the time? No, I don't think so. Should it be prohibited entirely? I think that's the matter where someone can go too far. Oh,
So,
sorry, did we lose the connection?
oh
Oh,
no, I'm
sorry.
just thinking of something to say. Actually, I really
Okay.
like.
Actually, I guess I'll throw up one more thought. This have you seen? We only have two of them, so there's not. Have you seen either of the Sibsat videos we put out? The ones where it's my sister and I in a thumbnail.
No, I haven't seen those.
Okay, that's something. It's interesting. We were wondering if that's of interest to people. But we're in terms of what we're putting up next to the channel, we have some more less serious content. So we have, and they're filmed. I just need to edit them. A meme review of Catholic memes, atheist memes, and Protestant memes, where my sister and I just go and we sit and we look at memes and we just kind of say random things about them. And some of it is theological because there's a meme on something and then you say, "Oh, is that true? Is that not true?" But that's something that we've been playing with, and the first couple, there's a couple people watch them, not a huge number of people watch them because it's different. It's like an hour, it's like a podcast style thing. But the last couple videos on the channel haven't caught the algorithm, so who knows if that's doing well or not. So might just be trying to put those out and see if anyone likes them. And so if you're the 7 people watching the stream, if you're seen on the channel and you like those, let us know if you like those. And if not, let us know if you don't like them because we're not quite sure about them. But almost all of our videos have been in the mold of just normal, like speaking about something, me in the chair speaking about something. Those are a little bit more silly. And I'm never quite sure when a little silly is too silly, but I think there's still theology to them. So in terms of things we're putting out, continuationism, transubstantiation, Islam, and then those are I'm probably, if I can actually stop and edit them and stop being lazy about it. We'll see if anything happens with those. Just to finish answering the question.
I think for my future videos, I've uploaded a video yesterday about what I call the scientific dilemma. And I'm uploading a short soon on that. I think the coming week. Then I've got a series about the Eucharist, which I think is pretty cool. I have like, I had tons of church father quotes saved up in my document made. I just like milked that for content. I made videos really quickly, like record one Sunday, record another Monday, and then next week record one Sunday. It just went really quickly. I'm like, I want to see what you think of this. Maybe we can discuss that one future point. But I think yeah.
Sure, that'd be interesting. I mean, that's convenient timing because Eucharist transubstantiation. We have a video on that. You have videos on that. That's the matter where, well, we don't have to get too far into it now. But I think I am someone, so as a Baptist, had a position that I fully acknowledge that it's not the most common in church history, which is the memorial view. But I'm open to the spiritual presence view. But I think the transubstantiation view is something where it doesn't seem to flow from, I mean, it'll be in the video. It doesn't seem to flow from the proof text used for it, so to speak. And I'll leave it there because we don't need to go too far on the topic, unless you want to.
So what do you think is the best argument against Islam?
In terms of practical effects, there's a little bit of where argument is like purely rational, like I have disproven you, and argument is a means to get someone to change their mind. And I think the most effective arguments are actually, what's the way to say it? Less logical. Not that they're irrational, but that they're not based primarily on like step-by-step reasoning syllogism. And so I think the best arguments are Muhammad married a very young girl. The Quran allows for the marriage of very young girls. And slavery in the Quran, adultery, well, actually, I'll go through the step. So Muhammad married a young girl and consummated the marriage at age 9. That seems terrible. Surah 65:4, any Muslim is allowed to do that. Surah, I think it's 424, someone can correct me, that it is an exception for adultery if it is a war captive that you have taken, that even if she's married, you can sleep with her and it's not adultery. That issues like that, where someone instinctively recoils from it, I think if someone is like lightly into Islam, like they grew up in it, it's not like their main thing, I think that's the sort of thing that really strikes them. Because you give them the Islamic dilemma, that is an airtight, rational, logical argument. Like it's indefeatable, it's bulletproof. But I think a lot of people go like, oh, well, and they'll maybe understand it, but it won't strike them in a certain way. I think that's a good argument for a debate. If you're debating with someone who's a Muslim and they're very well read and you're proving them wrong logically, rationally. But for someone who's, especially like talking to someone on the street, like, why is Islam wrong? You can say why it's wrong logically, but also I think we just have an instinctive human instinct. Well, you can get too much into depravity then. But living in Christianized societies, we have the moral sense through the benefits of being in Christendom for 2,000 years. That something like having an exception for adultery for your war captive is horrible. That consummating marriage with a very young girl is horrible. I think that kind of instinctive argument that strikes at someone's just feeling of conscience is probably the most effective. The Islamic dilemma is most rational. I think the most effective are the moral questions. I think that the thing that people are upset about Christianity over are things like the Old Testament, like the conquest of Canaan, because that strikes at them emotionally. There are rational explanations for that, but it strikes them emotionally. And I think with Islam, with these like much clearer evils, I think that's what strikes people and can probably be most effective.
I think it's cool you bring that up because I think one of the most best arguments against atheism is not so much a logical one, but it's more so the moral argument. It's basically it's not about saying you can't be moral without God, but that certain qualities of morality are hard to explain with atheism. Like with atheists oftentimes view human dignity as like you can speak, you can communicate, you can think, rationality, and that kind of leads to well, people with Down syndrome, you can just like kill them, that type of stuff. I think
Yeah.
I think this is what C.S. Lewis uses in his Mere Christianity, because he's not talking to like theologians or philosophers. He's talking to everyday like British people.
Yeah, I think that's a rock solid argument. You talked about that a little bit in, well, I guess it's a slightly different topic, and you speaking more on like the notion of finding truth, but in your materialism and evolution videos, it's just your framework for what's right and wrong is just if it's what I think is right and wrong, then your brain is just a series of atoms bouncing around. You don't have a real basis of it. It's like, oh, what I feel instinctively is right and wrong. Then that's based. Then that, from their perspective, from an evolutionary process meant to get you food and reproduction, not actual truth. That if you say, oh, I disagree with this thing that happened in the Bible because I say it's wrong. Like, on what basis is that wrong? That, like you're saying, that atheism doesn't have the ability to make moral critiques because it doesn't have a moral foundation to launch those critiques from.
One thing I might want to make for a video, so we can maybe do this together, is responding
Mhm.
to, as you brought up, like conquest of Cana objections, like oh, like God commanded genocide and that type of stuff. Because I think that's a really broad area that it's like gonna take a lot of time to cover. So maybe we can like work together covering different grounds in that area. So what would you think about that?
That'd be interesting. I think. Hmm, I'm trying to think of the best thing. See, part of this is me being like, "Oh, that's a tough one. I don't like to take a tough one," which is just me being lazy. What actually? I guess I'll ask a question because my understanding is, broadly speaking, the argument. Whoops, funny. I'm not sure what happened, but the live viewers just dropped down to one. Whatever. We'll keep going. The Do you take more of the position? I understand there's some people who say the attempt to say that the language used is primarily poetic, and then like this language of destruction is not actually the killing of everyone. Like for example, when I think it was the Amalekites, where it's like they struck them down and not one was left. Then the king of the Amalekites throughout the next verse. So that's using more metaphorical language. Is your thought more on the metaphorical language, or more on just the sense of God's justice? And God has the right to exercise judgment on those who have grieved Him.
I think it's a little
Like
bit.
I'm just curious of your own personal
I
preference.
think a little bit of both. Like I would do like a two-layer defense. Like first off, I think it was the Anakim, where it says that
Yeah,
they get completely like wiped out, and then later on, Caleb is sent to take over those same cities which were supposedly wiped out. In the metaphorical language, I think other countries near that, like ancient Near East, use that language too. There's this one inscription I heard of where this guy was saying, "Oh, we completely wiped out Israel, no one left," but still Israel standed at that time. So
yeah,
there is evidence that metaphorical language is used, but we should like if we should be able to say, well, sometimes obviously it does. I think with I can't remember what it was. I think it was in Numbers with the Moabites or something like that, where we have to say, oh, sometimes it is literal, sometimes it's metaphorical, that type of stuff. So we sometimes have to say, well, it is God is just, He gave us life, that type of stuff. But like this, it's such a wide area. There's also like slavery. There's like supposed to genocide, that type of stuff. So there's like so many areas to cover.
sorry, the stream just popped up a different. Okay, sorry, I think we're fine. Yeah, I think my general thought is that this is. I mean, some people do make critiques on this issue, but it always seems inconsistent when if someone is going to say like, "Oh, the conquest of Canaan is wrong," but then the flood is kind of set aside. Like my sister has made comments on this that like it is weird how the flood is almost like a very like children's story. Like you have the little giraffe sticking their head up through it when that is the largest exercise of God's judgment upon mankind in Scripture, like far greater than the conquest of Canaan was. And I do think that it then does come back at a certain level to, I mean, just the fundamental question where it's that God is able to exercise judgment in that way. That one you can think on the individual level, where it's like what you think the conquest of Canaan is might not be what it actually is in the actual context in the way the Bible is written. But then it does ultimately come down to, which is an uncomfortable thing, because people don't like this because people have grown up in the modern world, that God has the right over your life, my life, all our lives. And that fundamentally, to speak back against him and say, like, oh, we didn't deserve it, we all deserved it. Like, that's the fundamental teaching of Christianity, that at the end of the day, we all deserve it. And the time that we have been given is a mercy. And mercy is not exercised in every case wholly, but it does all work together toward God's mercy and his redemptive plan.
So how would you respond to like claims that the Bible says that slavery is okay? Like I know you said you're going to make a video about Islam and slavery. How would you respond to Muslims saying, well, the Bible affirms it too. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, I think there's probably going to be a twofold argument to that. One of which is like the actual nature of slavery. So in both the Old Testament and the New, that what's called the King James translation is man stealing, which is a fun term. That slavery in terms of chattel slavery, in which one's kidnapped, one's repressed into slavery, the kind of slavery that, for example, happened in the Americas, the slavery that we think like Civil War slavery, is condemned in both Old and New Testament. Actually, one of my favorite things, I think it's First Timothy 1:9. I can be fact checked on this. But in the list of the sins that Paul gives deserving judgment, right next to each other are man stealing, which is also translated as slave trading, and homosexuality. Which is funny because that's a verse that would offend people in the 1860s in one way and today in another way, which is funny. But the one prong of it is that the slavery is a different type of it, and the Bible does absolutely allow for slavery in a certain way. It's more similar in the way it's actually described to like indentured servitude, like the indentured servitude that the Irish came under the United States. The word slavery is used. We apply the word slavery, and people automatically think of the worst thing they can think of, and it is a different system, but it is a system that is still a form of slavery. Like we can't deny that that's the case. But I think that then one can speak. I think it's in Matthew 19 to that the law in some form was given in a way according to the hardness of men's hearts, where Jesus says that Moses allowed you to give a certificate of divorce, but this was given an allowance for the hardness of men's hearts. In the beginning, it was not this way. I think one can speak on slavery in a similar sense. Like in the beginning, there was no divorce. That was not God's original plan. And then in the beginning, there was not slavery. There were humans did not operate in that way to each other. But according to the hardness of men's hearts, certain allowances were made in the law for things that were not God's ideal. And then I think this is almost indisputable from history, that the New Testament gave the foundation of man as made in God's image that led to the abolition of slavery. Like Gregory of Nyssa is the first like real anti-slavery active emancipationist that you see, and he's in the 300s. He's an early Christian theologian. The William Wilberforce leading the opposition to slavery. So I think that if someone tries to pretend that slavery didn't happen, I mean, you can pretend that it didn't happen, but it's not the type that people are thinking of, and it's given in a way that is an allowance for the hardness of men's hearts. And Christianity is then the one that comes and takes it away. That leads to the abolition of slavery across the world. That if you're going to make that as an attack against Christianity, that's an attack against every system because slavery is a worldwide practice. But Christianity is the one that abolished it. So even if one is going to try to make a moral argument there, the moral argument should be stronger in favor of the idea that Christianity abolished it. And then of course you also have to ask them questions like, oh, on what ground is that immoral? But I think that slavery is it's uncomfortable because we instinctively think, oh, slavery bad, and we think it's the worst form of it. But both in type and the actual end of it, I think speak to Christianity. I think speak positively to Christianity.
Another argument people try to use against the Bible is like a reverse one, something that they say was condemned in the Bible, but it's permissible now, like interest and usury. They say, oh, well, it's condemned in the Old Testament, so it's like, it's why are we using it now? Like, what do you think about that?
That's fascinating. I was just looking at that a few months ago, where we as a society changed so dramatically to the point where like interest in any form is unacceptable. This we all just kind of had shrug and said, okay, that's fine. I think part of it is, and I'm not well bred enough to say this definitively, so this is based on my understanding, that the way in which usury was designed in terms of like the catechism is it's an understanding of usury that is uncertain from the specific primarily Old Testament prohibitions. I'm not sure there's a New Testament prohibition about it. I mean, interest is spoken of in the New Testament because the parable of the talents said it could be given with the bank that got interest. So
I
I
was just
do
about to
think
say
that one can.
that. I was just.
Nice, great minds think alike. I do think that, and I'm not even condemning the Catholic Church here. I think it's probably a good thing that they did. I think that the strictness of the medieval prohibitions on usury may have gone beyond what the Old Testament actually set out. It's not to say that they're bad, but I think that if someone says that like, oh, look at this big flip and change, that it's so much a biblical change as a change in applicability. That I don't think yeah, I'll add the sentence there. I think it's primarily a change in applicability and interpretation than a biblical change. I think a little bit of a stricter negative mindset on usury in the modern day might actually be helpful, but I don't think it's a biblical flip flop. I think it's primarily an interpretive flip flop. But flip flop sounds bad. Interpretive reform, we'll say that sounds nice, even if it's not necessarily in the right direction. Something I was curious about, speaking to your most recent video on atheism, just out of curiosity, do you put yourself in a? Because I think you in the video were speaking of like naturalistic evolution in their framework. Do you personally take a like a theistic evolution viewpoint or a creationistic viewpoint, or just out of curiosity?
I'm more so creationist because it just seems more fitting. Like you can believe in evolution, I just lean more towards just creationism. Seems more straightforward.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I That's something that this is. I'll give a shout out to a children's program that was very nice. It was called Jonathan Park, and it was I think it was from Focus on the Family, and it gave with surprisingly like deep science some of the real strong arguments for creationism against evolutionary theory, against like issues like the fossil record, the matter of the Cambrian implosion, stuff like that. And it was a really impressive thing insofar of giving like real true concepts just on scientific grounds, not even just biblical grounds. I don't think they weren't quoting Bible verses, they were quoting science to you. That was really helpful for kids growing up. My sister and I both listened to it. And then so you're going to high school, you're going to college, it's like, oh, is this all true? And I think you just look into the evolutionary narrative and you see so many holes on a scientific basis and also on a theological basis, just like God created the garden and called it good, but actually secretly there was 3 billion years of death before, 4.5 billion years of death before it. It does seem I won't go so far. I'll be more. It's concerning to me when someone like just jumps in and says like, "Oh, evolution. Yeah, of course I'm going to jump on that." Like, I think it requires such a different view. Oh, we have a question. I'll get that in a second. Such a different view of Genesis that I have really severe concern for the way that person is looking at Scripture. Because at a certain point, I mean, we all do this in a way that if I want to read Scripture to fit what I already want to be true, you can twist Scripture to say a lot of things, but that's not the right mindset to take the Scripture. We have, I think this would probably fit more to you. It's a question about Catholicism. It says, oops, sorry, just minimize it again. Are Catholics allowed to have a diversity of opinion on creation, or has the Vatican made that decision for them already via decree? I think I know the answer to this, but you can go ahead. You probably
Like,
have a better sense of the Catholic
like
view.
Catholics can believe in evolution or creationism, but with evolution, it's you can't say that the soul evolved. It's like the body evolved, and you still have to affirm that we have like two first parents and that they both committed the first sin. So it's you can't just say oh there was like tons of different like apes or something like that. It's more so that, like the soul can't evolve. It's God gave the breath of life, and that became our soul, and the sin of our first parents, Adam and Eve, came to us all. I think that's the most important thing to emphasize with evolution. It's not so much you have to say creationism or you have to say evolution. It's just do we affirm that we have two first parents and that they committed a sin and that has come down to all of us in the consequences.
Yeah, essentially holding to the theology as primary, science as secondary. That yeah, that if I make the joke, and this is a little bit silly, but that form of theistic evolution is kind of like stapling a soul to a monkey. That like evolution happened, and then it's like, hey, you know what? There's Adam. Staple a soul to him. But yeah, I mean, I obviously been plenty of mainline Protestants also believe in evolution. I think opening the door is troublesome, but one must hold the ground on the theology, and I think the science can interfere with that insofar as if the science is being put above your theology, you're going to lead the problem, and hence that's why it comes to creationist perspective. But at the very least, you got to hold the ground in the theology. That's fundamental. I think you hold the ground in the theology by holding the ground in the science, but I won't go on too long of a spiel about that. Won't get too far off the topic.
Do you have a question? Not to get into a debate or anything. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. You answered the question.
No,
Wait. Oh, that was a question. Oh.
the person had a follow up question. Did you see it? Oh wait, here. Yeah. How can this work? So, I think this person is just saying the same sort of thing that like humans evolved and then God gave a soul to two cavemen named Adam and Eve. I think it just is the idea that Adam and Eve were chosen in some sense, and it's not particularly specified how it was. But sorry, you were asking.
Not to get into debate, what do you think about calling Mary Mother of God? Because I know I think that's the one doctrine that a lot of Protestants like closetly believed in sometimes. So what do you think of that?
I'm really interested in this. So this is something where another thing I keep meaning to make a video on and not doing. I think the term, like the original Greek term, Theotokos, I think that is a better term than Mother of God insofar as that is usually translated as God bearer. I think that Mother of God, my general mindset on it is essentially that I'm not going to say it's inherently unacceptable. I think the fruit of it is troublesome and God bearer makes clear that Jesus is God and that Mary carried him in her womb. But because mother has different meanings to it, you can be the mother of adopted child, or you can be a mother as in you have created this being. And when you say mother, not you specifically, but like when the term mother of God is used, I think it can give an impression that leads to things like, for example, Islam thinks that Mary is part of the Trinity. I think some of that comes from when you hear mother of God being said, you get a different idea of like, does that mean that Mary is the mother of divinity? And she's not. And a person can explain that. But I think that if a term is being used that requires theological explanation so people don't get misled by it, I think that's ultimately troublesome, especially when another term is available. Then I think that I would strongly recommend against the usage of the term Mother of God, because at least you're speaking to just a random person, because people can get the wrong idea, and you can use another term like God bearer that gives the exact same emphasis to the divinity of Jesus, but without causing a certain level of confusion. Like you would call Joseph Father of God because he's the adopted father, but that's silly and no one does it. I think God bearer is a much more useful title insofar that it prevents leading to some, like in South America, that certain level where you get to, or even a psaltery of Mary. You can get to a certain level where Mary is venerated to an extreme degree, an excessive degree. Like you and I probably have different bars for that, but we both agree that the bar is somewhere. I think Mother of God is something that can push more people over the top of that bar into improper veneration. And so I think God bearer is a more historic and more useful and less possibly troublesome title, in my opinion.
I can see where you're coming from. For me personally, like Godbearer sounds really like cool. Like, oh, the final boss of like some video game, Godbearer. It just sounds so cool.
It does sound like that. I was going to say this. This is something that Catholicism has had a bit of a video game feel to it to me in some ways, especially when I was a kid and I didn't know much about it, which in some ways is cool, in some ways is questionable. It's like choose your patron saint, like receive this indulgent side quest, like do 6 Hail Marys to receive plenary indulgence. Obviously, I'm using the term loosely, but there are the little fun thing that I thought as a kid, mostly hearing about Catholicism from my friends who were like semi-Catholic. Like, hey, that sounds like a video game. It actually sounds like a fun video game. It sounds like a video game. Question in the chat? No, people are just talking to each other in the chat. Not for us, it looks like.
Have you read the Book of Mormon?
I have not read the Book of Mormon. I have read sections of some of the Mormon scriptures, primarily for apologetic reasons, which I guess a Mormon would criticize insofar as like, oh, you're just looking at this to expose it. It's like, yeah, your religion is very clearly false. Like, what I think it was the second video we did in Doctrines and Covenants. I think it's 132. There's this crazy bit where just I think on the surface level, you're like, that's not from God. Where Joseph Smith has, or God said it's like, God says, I give a command to my handmaid Emma Smith, who's Joseph's wife, that she needs to cleave to Joseph Smith and accept all the others that I give to him, and if not, I will destroy her. Where Joseph Smith is marrying other girls, and his wife is mad at him about it. So he's like, wait just a second, babe. Goes, writes it down. Hey, babe, God said that you have to be okay with me sleeping with these other women. It's like, I mean, kind of like with Muhammad. It's the most obvious, like, this dude is just making stuff up kind of thing. It's the craziest thing. But in terms of actually like sitting down and reading it, I have not. I've read sections and chapters and stuff, mostly like looking on theological issues, but I haven't actually given it a real read. Have you?
I haven't read the Book of Mormon. I've read the Quran. I think it's interesting to say that Mormonism is American Islam. They both claim, oh, that the gospel got corrupted and I came to fix it, and that type of stuff. Prophet, like with an angel, that type of stuff. And they make similar arguments, like, oh, our book has, like, our book is, how could an unlettered man write this? It's got prophecies and all that stuff. So they make very similar arguments.
There's an old video, like it might be more than 10 years old, from one of the OG channels called Lutheran Satire on this. Have you ever heard of that?
I think I have.
Yeah, it's very his most famous video is a thing where it's like the two Irish guys talking to Patrick.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Funny.
Come on, Patrick, that's modalism.
But he has a video. It's called. Yes, exactly. He has another video that's really good. It's called a Latter Day Regift, and it's very silly. It's like just a little like Microsoft Paint animation kind of thing, or like clip art. But he has like two demons, like Beelzebub and someone else are talking to each other, and he's like, "Oh, I made you a new false religion for your birthday," and it's Mormonism, but it's a copy off of Islam. So the one guy's like, "Oh," and the one guy's like, "This seems like a copy. Would you say that the prophet is translating things that he doesn't know how to translate? Is he taking lots of wives? Is he doing all this stuff?" and it's very funny. It's just a direct exactly what you're saying that like Mormonism is eerily similar to Islam, like bizarrely so.
I like a random point that you mentioned earlier how Muslims generally like Paul a lot. I think it's interesting to know how,
Mhm.
since they have such a focus on language, Paul knew the language Jesus spoke, Muhammad didn't. So it's like, it's not that language is so important, but because Muslims make language so important with the Quran, like it has to be in Arabic, that kind of backfires when it comes to Paul.
Yeah, wasn't I'm speaking outside of my expertise here, but isn't even the name they give to Jesus, Isa, actually incorrect? Like Isa is Esau, and Jesus. I can't remember what Jesus is, but like even the Arabic name they give to Jesus is incorrect. They don't know exactly what they're talking about.
I'm not sure actually. Like I know they call him Isa sometimes, but I
Yeah,
don't. Yeah.
yeah. I'm saying something I've heard. Maybe I'm wrong. Don't jihad me for getting a mistake about your religion. Nah, no, it's a dumb joke. I just say I let me check this in. I don't have any other big questions. We can keep on going as long or short as you want, but this has actually been. I'm surprised it worked technically as well as it has. This has actually been quite a bit of fun.
Yeah. Wait, another similarity between Islam and Mormonism about like you said, like with Mormonism, that it talks about. I'm sorry, lose my train of thought. How like God supposedly tells James Joseph Smith's wife that you got to let him marry these other women. It's kind of like with Islam because even Aisha notes to Muhammad that God keeps fulfilling your desires. Like with his Muhammad had an
Yeah,
adopted son and he liked his adopted son's wife, so he got rid of adoption just so he can marry her.
crazy stuff, man. Yeah, I can't remember the name, so I'm not gonna say it. But I think that that's one of the just speaking of like Christianity as a whole versus other religions. Like, what did people get out of it? Like the founders of the religion. Muhammad got a bunch of wives in an empire. Joseph Smith got a bunch of wives, and I mean, and he's getting killed. But he was trying to found his own little. I would say Joseph Smith ran for president. That's actually a crazy thing. He was running for president. I think at the time that he was assassinated, which is wild. But what did Jesus get? Crucified. What did the disciples get? Crucified upside down, dropped in burning oil, impaled. Just in terms of like, it's not in itself an entire proof for the religion, but on a base level, if someone's like, "Oh, Christianity just created to control people," the people who created Christianity, so to speak, obviously it's from God, but like the disciples, the immediate followers of Jesus, suffered horribly for it. Like if they were doing this to like get rich and powerful, they failed utterly. Like the fact that Christianity was of no benefit to its originators, except in the way that matters most, eternal reward. There was no earthly benefit speaks to me as a very strong evidence that this is not just an earthly man-made religion.
So when do you want to do a live stream next? Maybe have like a little discussion or
Timing
debate.
wise, so actually, so I was gonna say debate. This is very much open to your thoughts, but I don't know off the top of my head someone who could moderate. I think we're both polite people and we wouldn't have a real problem just doing one without a moderator. But I'd be fine doing either like discussion debate and then like, oh, we'll talk about transubstantiation, just kind of talk back and forth for a set amount of time, or if you wanted to do it more formally, like 5 minute opening, 3 minute counterpoint, 5 minute Q&A session, something like that. I'd be fine with either of those setups. Do you have a preference between those?
Maybe more casual, like a little more chill, civil, that type of
Okay.
stuff.
Yeah, I'm down for that. I know you mentioned that you're doing something on transubstantiation. Would you want to do it on that topic, or I'm basically any topic I'm open for. I mean, there's some things I know less about, and there's some things I know more about, but I'm open to just about any topic.
Yeah, I think transubstantiation would be a good topic.
Nice. That. So I guess this is a. So in terms of scheduling, the next couple of weekends, I maybe we could find an afternoon. We'll probably talk with Ian about scheduling, but in terms of relative timing, would you prefer to have we each have the videos that we have up and then debate about them, or debate about them and then put those videos up?
What if we have the videos up and then debate?
Okay, I'm fine with that. Yeah, we should talk about that email. Unfortunately, it depends on if I can get an afternoon because my next couple of weekends are unfortunately picked up. But yeah, let's try to slow down time. That'd be fun. We'll set just casual debate discussion. We'll set a relative time limit, and then we can even if we would debrief. Well, I guess that would yeah, we'll organize the exact details of it, but transubstantiation debate in a general casual format, and we'll sort out the details. That sounds good. Nice. Is there anything else? Just unless you have anything else to say, just in wrapping up that we got 6 people watching. So anything you want to say to 6 people about you're talking a little about the future plans, but anything, well, anything you want to close out with? I obviously don't have anything to think of to close out, which is why I'm rambling again.
Yeah, I think that's all.
Awesome. Well, thanks. Thank you for everyone who watched or commented. His channel, I don't know if for some reason, okay, this is a brief sidebar. I think there's a setting in YouTube that you can put on where it says that you cannot be tagged in anything. Because whenever I type in at Joshua blah blah blah, it doesn't tag. I even saw on Hammer of Heretics thing that it didn't like make the blue hyperlink. So that might be causing you to be unable to be tagged. It might be somewhere in the settings, but just saying that to the sense of obviously if you're watching this on my channel, jump over to Heretic Apologetics channel, check him out. I'll try to put a link in that in the description. But yeah, this was fun. This was neat, and we'll organize another one. So leave comments if you're watching this after the fact. If you are interested in that debate on transubstantiation, if you're interested in other things, if you've got other thoughts, let us know what you think. We don't know what to do if we don't know your opinion unless you share them with us. So feel free to share them with us. Check out his channel. Check out our channel. We both got lots of fun stuff, and we disagree on some things, and so you can take a look at both of them and see where it susses out. See what you think follows the truth. So thank you all. Anything else?
Nope, I think that's it. Well, bye.
Alrighty. God bless. See ya.
See ya.